Hi guys, I hope you are doing well. Welcome to the second session. I hope you have watched the first session carefully and patiently and you have practiced the given lessons. And just in case if you had any question we can answer, I will be glad to answer to your questions. I hope I can help you in your learning process. Anyway, let's just start the second lesson, or actually session. As I mentioned before, we call these viewports: top, perspective, front and right. They are clear. I mean, if you have an object, then you can observe your model from different kinds of viewports. As you can see, for example, here you got your object from perspective viewport, then from the top, front and right. Well done, but you may want to customize your viewports, for example removing right and having the left viewport instead. So how do we can modify our viewports and customize them? Here if I open the items in set views, here the different kinds of viewports are offered. Then you can assign the viewports, some of these views, for example left. So I assign this viewport to the view of left, or for example I may want to replace back with front. I open it, set views, back. Well done, this is the back view that we got it in the viewport. However, we can right click on the back instead of opening the drop down list. Well done. And if you want to maximize each of these viewports and have them in full screen mode, you can double click on each of the names like perspective. Then for minimizing, double click. Then you will have the 4 views. And the shortcut is Ctrl+M for maximizing your views or minimizing them. For example, in the perspective view, I press Ctrl+M. It maximizes the perspective view. Then we get it in the full screen mode. Then if I want to toggle to the top view, we don't have to minimize and then maximize the top view, because this is not the right approach. We got a better way. For example, if I want to toggle to the front view, it is not necessary to minimize the top view and then maximize the front view, because we got them in the viewport tabs, as you can see. So we can choose each one you want: perspective, top, front, left. So after maximizing your viewport, then you can use these viewports tabs to toggle between the viewports or views. You don't have to right click, you don't have to press Ctrl+M, since you got an easy access to the views in the viewports tabs. Then you can switch between the views. You can even modify the scale of your viewports. For example, perspective is frequently used, or it is more useful than the others. Here I maximize the scale since it is more significant for me, or even I can arrange them by this way, click and drag. And I do not recommend these arrangement personally, since you'd better to have them full screen and then you can change them to top, for example, so you don't have to have all of the views in the screen simultaneously by this way. But if your viewports weren't well arranged in your scene and you wanted to fix them or reset them to the default mode, here in a standard tab, in for viewports and for default viewports, if I click on it, it returns the 4 viewports to the default mode arrangement. A question about these that I was looking for its answer for a long time was that how do we can have more than 4 viewports tabs? For example, I may want to add the left viewports tab, since sometimes I may want to maximize the left view. So watch this part carefully, since it's got a technique. Here if I open viewport layout, here we got a option named new viewport and close viewport. If I click on it, left click, then we will be given an added viewport, an extra viewport in the scene, and the corresponding viewport will be added to the tabs. But the trick that I use here is to move the top by click and drag, and then I place it on the another one, front. Actually not front, I mean these 2 views are overlapping on each other, and the viewport tab is added to here too. Again I click on it, and by click and drag I move it, and then I place it on the perspective view by this way. As you can see, the viewport tab is added. I can maximize the view, full screen mode, but we already had the top view in the tabs. No matter, since I can modify it. Check this out, left view. And for the another top view, I want to assign the bottom view to this. So I first maximize it, then I open the drop down list. In set view, I set the bottom view like this way. So this was a trick that I used for having more than 4 viewport tabs in a just simply process actually. For example, perspective, maximize by double click, and just in case if you were annoyed by the grid lines as you can see on the scene, or if you were just eager to hide the grid lines, you can use the shortcut of F7 for disabling the grid lines. Again, I'm gonna remind you, if you press down F7 and it didn't work out, you'd better to hold down Fn. So this time hold down Fn and then press down F7. But about the grid lines, let me tell you a point. Here, as you can see, each of these grids are representing a unit. We are not talking about project units like meters, centimeters, millimeters, inches. I'm talking about the unit. And each of these grids are representing a unit. And when you set your units or specify your units, your project units in Rhino, for example, it is per meter, then the units will be per meters or per millimeters or centimeters or inches. So note that the grid lines are representing the unit, a meter, a millimeter, or a centimeters, or whatever, that we got them in the project units. And another point is that the boundaries of the grid lines are endless or infinite actually. I mean, when we are using these snaps, these object snaps actually, as you can see, we got the grids as well here, which shows that we got the grid lines everywhere since they cover the entire scene. That, as I told you, we can control the visibility by using F7. But let's talk about the graphical style for displaying the objects in the scene. Here let me place multiple objects in the scene to prepare the example for teaching you the graphical styles. I enable the object snaps. I sketched another object. And one more object here, as you can see. Well done. And then a surface beneath the objects. And you can use the boxes and the spheres for practicing, since these are not that much complex, since we haven't reached the lessons. But about the graphical modes or the graphical styles for displaying or showing the objects, let me give you an explanation and teach them. Here, if I right click on the name of the viewport, for example perspective, or just open the drop down list, we will have them at the top part of the list. The first one is wireframe. You are already familiar with them from other software, and everything will be shown in lines, and the frames and the boundaries are the most parts of the objects in this graphical style. They are displayed transparent, but it is not that much used commonly. The next one is shaded. At this graphical style, the objects are displayed in colors and they are no more transparent, as you can see, and they are displayed solid. And the third type is rendered, but don't get me wrong, it doesn't renders the objects. Check this out. But the differences between shaded and the rendered graphical styles is that we won't have the boundaries, the edges, the lines in the rendered graphical style. I mean, they will be hidden. In fact, it offers us a preview of the rendered object. So in the preview of the objects, it gives us a big picture from the rendered objects, a type of representation. But what about ghosted, which is frequently used? As you can see, the objects are displayed like a ghost. As you can see, they are displayed in color, and they are neither transparent and nor solid. We can observe inside the objects too. And we can use this especially when we got some objects inside the another objects and we want to work on them. While in wireframe, they are not obscure enough, so they are hard to be distinguished. But if I choose ghosted, they are being displayed at the middle part of the two extremes of transparent and obscure. And we can distinguish each of the objects carefully, surely. The next one is X-ray. It seems like ghosted. Could you say what is the difference between ghosted and X-ray? Excellent. Here in ghosted graphical style, we can see the overlapping parts between the objects, while in X-ray the overlapping parts are not visible. Some lines are highlighted, while in X-ray it seems like wireframe. However, they are showed in colors, and the boundaries and the frames are hard to be distinguished, which is not commonly used. But about technical, check this out. Could you say why it is named technical? Yes, of course, since the inside parts or the overlapping parts are displayed in dotted lines, and also the intersections between the two objects are displayed too, and it could be helpful for 2D drawings. And then artistic, as you can see, they are displayed in graphical appearance, also pen and arctic, ray traced. Check this out. Ray traced offers us the rendered version. In fact, here we are given the rendered of the objects, or the rendered versions, that I will talk about it later. But among these graphical styles of the displayment of the objects, the first 4 types are the most commonly or frequently used styles. Because of this, we have put these tools or these styles in our pop-up too, and I will tell you the shortcuts too. I press the middle mouse button. As you can see, this gives us or offers us the shaded and wireframe viewports both. Pressing left and right buttons or mouse buttons, shaded by left click, and right click offers us wireframe. So we can find them 2 of them there. Then here we got ghosted viewports, and set all viewports display to ghosted. Then you can set it to just one of the viewports or to all of the viewports by left and right click. Check this out, ghosted viewports, and then render preview viewport, which gives us the rendered preview. And note that for modifying the graphical viewport, do not use this. Do not open the drop-down list unless you wanted to enable the technical or X-ray or other viewports, since it is not considered professional while you got them in your pop-up. So all of them are in hand and useful. But about the shortcuts, if you hold down Alt plus Control and then press the first word or the first letters, for example wireframe is W, I hold down Alt and Control, then I press W. Or for shaded, holding down Alt and Control, then pressing S, we will have shaded graphical style. Rendered, Alt Control, and then I press R. Ghosted, which was G. So don't forget to hold down the buttons of Alt and Control together meanwhile you are pressing the first word or the first word cases instead of opening the drop-down list, since it takes a long time and it is not professional. Well done. Let us talk about the different zooming that we got them and used them in Rhino. After finishing the viewports and the graphical viewports, fortunately all of them are, most of them are similar to AutoCAD. So if you are skilled at AutoCAD, you already know this lesson. But if you are not familiar with AutoCAD, watch this part carefully. Zoom extend as the first item fits the whole object in your current scene at the size of the screen. But just before clicking on zoom extend, let me zoom extend manually like this to adjust the scene or screen at the size or scale of the screen using the shortcut of zoom extend. Here if I type Z in command line for enabling zoom command, you don't have to type the rest of the words or the rest of the command. Just press Z and then enter, then extends. As you can see, E is underlined, and then I type E, enter. For getting access to the command of zoom extend, Z enter, E enter, Z enter, E enter for zoom extend. By this way, as you can see, you can find it in the toolbar too, zoom extends. Some users may add zoom extends to pop up too, but I recommend you to learn the shortcut instead of using this in your pop-up. But what about zoom selected, which is very useful and has got many functions. I place some objects by this way. I just want to tell you the example. Suppose that if I want to work on each of these new objects in the scene, zoom extend is no more practical here. and it is not functional, so I type Z enter, E enter. Since I want to focus on the selected object, I'm gonna zoom in to the selected object. So I'm gonna use zoom selected to focus on the selected object. After selecting the object, zoom is selected. However, we got it in the pop-up too. Check this out. However, we got it in the commands of the zoom. We can type Z enter, S enter. I select it, Z enter, S enter. But since it is frequently used, I have added this into my pop-up. So you can select whatever you want and then pop up, zoom selected, or you can use the shortcuts. But another approach for zooming is use scroll. The scroll wheel simply, which is common between all of the softwares. At first, you should make the cursor of the mouse close to your object and then scroll up to zoom in and then scroll down to zoom out. But note that the camera will zoom in on the place that you have positioned the cursor of the mouse. As you can see, wherever I put the cursor of the mouse, and then if I use scroll, it zooms in there. The place of the cursor of the mouse determines the position or the direction of the zooming. So at first we should specify the target that we want to zoom on, and then we can use the scroll. Sometimes while working on our project, we may need to have delicate zooming. At small scales, not large scales, as you can see. At such a condition for small scales of zooming, if I hold down Control and then I right click, I hold down Control and right click as well, and then I move the mouse and I can zoom in and out in a low speed, while the previous one, this speed was high, as you can see. So I hold down Control, then right click, right mouse button, then I move the mouse. I can zoom in and out in low speed in order to represent the details. Well done. And in the 2D viewports, note that I'm talking about the 2D viewports. Could you please tell me some examples of 2D viewports? Excellent. Top, front, back, right, left, everything except perspective. In 2D viewports, here if I press the right mouse button, it enables you to pan the screen, as you can see in 2D viewports, and using right mouse button. But don't forget that only in 2D viewports. But in perspective view, it rotates the view, as you can see. It doesn't pan. Perspective view, you can use right mouse button for rotating the view, while you can pan the view in 2D viewports while rotating in perspective. But if you want to pan the view or screen in the perspective view, you should hold down Shift and then by right click or right mouse button, you can pan. But if you use right mouse button alone, you can rotate the view. If I hold down Shift, it enables me to pan. But let's talk about the tips and techniques about rotating the scene or the view. As I told you before, we can rotate the scene by using right click. But right now, suppose that I'm working on this object, for example. Here if I press right click, as you can see, the scene is rotating. Since the scene is not rotating about the object and the pivot point is not the object. If I try here again, I rotate. As you can see, the scene is not rotating about the object, and you may have encountered with this before in other softwares. But I'm gonna tell you how we can specify or determine the pivot point and rotate around a specific object. You need to select the object and then click on zoom selected. After that, this selected object will be determined as the pivot point. Then we can rotate around the object. Even right now, we are rotating around the selected one, but if I select this one, for example, zoom selected, then we can rotate around this object since we have determined the pivot point. Let's try again, zoom selected and then rotating. And another function of zoom selected is, suppose that we have sketched something like this one, then I zoom in, I focus on it. You're limited to zoom in to the extents. So when you weren't allowed to zoom in, you can use zoom selected and then you can zoom in as much as you want. Let me sketch another thing like this one, a box. I zoom in, then we will have some obstacles in zooming in or on focusing on it, I select the object, then I click on zoom selected. Then it enables me to focus on the selected object or zooming in and out by using scroll as much as I want. And if you want to practice this part of the Session 2, I want to assign you a homework, just like 2 boxes using rectangle. Like this, you can sketch some objects. Then you can practice the given commands, just like zooming. And if you wanted to work on higher details, you can work on solid creations like this way, and they are easy to be sketched. But don't forget to promise to yourself that you're not allowed to skip the videos or just moving them forward. So watch the videos carefully and don't forget to practice. See you next session.